Hello again, Gills fans. Welcome back to the latest episode of Gills in the Blood TV. It's Sunday evening, so of course it means match day review time. And unfortunately, myself and Rhys are back to talk about a third consecutive loss for Mark Bonner's men as we went down by 2-1 at home to lowly Accrington Stanley on Saturday afternoon. A game where we seemed fairly comfortable in for the most part, but then managed to implode in the final half an hour. One of them afternoons, wasn't it, Rhys, where I think a lot more questions were raised rather than answers.
Absolutely. And yeah, and it was just a very frustrating afternoon overall. It was one of the, obviously, losing in the last minute is always very painful, but it's with the context of now it being the third loss in a row, it kind of makes, yeah, I can understand why questions are being fired left, right, and centre, both if they're the right or the wrong question. But regardless, you can sense the frustration and amongst everyone, and yeah, that's understandable. So it wasn't a nice experience yesterday.
Yeah, exactly. Because again, it comes back to the thing that we say about over and over again. If we win games and we're playing fairly well and getting results, people are go and praise people on social media, and managers and players are happy to lap that up. So when it goes the other way, there has to be questions asked, and people have to understand that on social media, there's going to be those questions fired at individuals, the team, the management, the coaches, or whatever. Team news, anyway. We'll start there, and then we'll try and get through this as best we can. Um, Slight change in system for the Gills, it looked like, certainly in terms of personnel when we read the team sheet. So there was a couple of changes from the defeat against Crewe last Saturday. So it was Glenn Morris in goal, same back four, Hutton, Amer, Ogie and Clark. But then it was a quartet in midfield of Nolan, Coleman, Little and Jaden Clark. And then up front, Marcus Wiley came in to play, we thought, alongside Elliot Nevitt in a good old-fashioned 4-4-2. In terms of Accrington Stanley, theirs looked like a 3-4-1-2. Krellin in goal, three centre halves of Ali Joffrey, Rawson, and Orr. And then it was Love, Corneely, Woods, and Batty. And then in the 10 was Wally supporting Knowles and Costello. Yeah, first question, because we've seen a lot about it, certainly for home games. And I can understand it more in home games against sides that were 23rd at kickoff. We can't pretend that Accrington have come in form or as a great side to Priestfield, and that's no disrespect to them. The old adage, the table doesn't lie. So can we understand Mark Bonner going 4-4-2 and trying to put more pressure on a side that weren't playing well? Only won their first game of the season last week.
And yeah, you can understand that. And also on top of that, they're the leagueiest defence in the whole of League Two at the moment. So I mean that compounds the idea that we should be trying to exploit that as much as possible, really, because that's where their Achilles heel lies. So you need to attack that, and yeah, so you can kind of understand that, trying to create an attacking lineup to be able to underpin their defence and get something from the game. But yeah, I can understand that, tactically speaking, absolutely.
Fair enough. And we'll get on to whether it worked or whether it didn't as we go through the show. I've written down my paragraph as usual. I've put, felt on the whole we were offering more, or at least trying to. Stanley looked to have come for a point up until they equalised. And from our own failings, we allowed them too easily to take control of the final half hour, which is where the game was ultimately won.
Yeah. I like I was thinking about your paragraph yesterday. I like the phrase snatching defeat from the jaws of victory. It would have been quite a nice way to kind of sum that
We
one up as
absolutely
well.
did, yeah, unfortunately.
Yeah, and yeah, you're absolutely right. I like your idea of Stanley were looking to play for a draw, but they just suddenly realised they could win. That as a concept, it's definitely probably that embodied yesterday. Absolutely, they probably thought, oh, we've got a point, or maybe we can get more. They're falling apart, and I think that's exactly what happened.
Absolutely, we were, and everything was self-inflicted, which is the biggest concern, I think. Right, first half, I thought we started okay. Again, Max Finally won the coin toss, it seemed, and we were shooting towards the town end, the Brian Moore stand, for the first half, for the first time this season. Yeah, there were early chances. I think there was a ball into the box from Armani Little. Ethan Coleman directed a header straight at Krellin, unfortunately. And then I think there was another turnover of possession. Elliot Nevitt went for goal. There was talk of handball. I couldn't tell from my seat, absolutely miles away, but it was showing good intensity, which was the first thing. And number two, the question to you is, from your view, watching on the telly, was there any chance of a penalty being given? I think it was for handball. I'm not really sure.
Oh, put it this way, it didn't even cross my mind that was even a thing yesterday, in that fashion play. So there you go. I didn't even
Shall
notice
move
it.
on. But yeah, in terms of the start, it felt all right, and it felt like we'd done what we've done on plenty of occasions, certainly at home this season. We
Yeah.
started high up the pitch. We were pressing well. But the game very quickly became attritional. And that comes back to my point that I made in that opening paragraph, that Stanley, it was fairly clear, we're going to play on the counter-attack and play for a point. They were taking every opportunity to slow it down from throw-ins, to take ages over set plays, over goal kicks. They were going down and needing treatment at every opportunity from the slightest of contacts. Yeah, there was just no flow to it, was there? After that sort of initial burst from us, it just felt like a very sort of middle of the pitch kind of game.
It was a messy game in that context. I mean, actually, you're right. We did start with some intent, and those that were caught into the box and a header and so on. And like, I actually thought the first 7 minutes we looked okay. We're taking this properly. We're gonna take this with a lot more confidence, a lot of intent to try and win. That's going to bounce back from our 2 previous results. But yeah, the game did come look at a war of attrition. It came sloppy. It came disruptive. And I think that's a really good point that maybe we could think about, is that teams that will come to Priestfield and try to be disruptive, knowing that we're meant to be the team on the front foot with the possession, and we've been that team. Accrington were yesterday at one point, and we've been on the other side of that. But yeah, it did turn into a very messy game with no flow, and that just fell into Accrington's hands.
Yeah, because from sort of 7-8 minutes up until about half hour, it just felt like nothing was happening at all. Like it was just a non-event completely. I always try to gauge it off of both teams' social media accounts, and we'll get to a point later in the show at the end of the game, but there wasn't a great deal coming out of either X account. But the game did spring back into life just before the half hour, and suddenly it went from being attritional and poor and bitty and scrappy and fragmented to just being sort of chance after chance after chance for 5 minutes. The first chance was for us. I think Jack Nolan did really well down the right with Romeo Hutton. His cutback is good, similar to the one against Tranmere the other week, where Little scored. This time I think Jaden Clark makes a really good run, which I didn't notice live. When I looked it back on the clip that I'd recorded, he makes a great run from outside to in from his left wing position. Sort of gets a side foot on it. Keeper saves with his foot, comes back out. Marcus Wiley has a shot cleared off the line. It's a decent passage of play, and probably better than I realised at the time. But when that happens, you sort of think, this is it. We're settling back into our routine. We're controlling the tempo. We're controlling where the game's being played. Right, let's kick on again.
Yeah, that's it, and I think that's what that point of that game needed, because there was no flow whatsoever. So you need someone to take the lead and go, right, we need to reset, we need to make something happen, we need to put a few passes together, a nice passage of play to show what we're made of, to use the skills that we've been and our ability to be able to make things happen. And yeah, that happened then, and it just and I think that's the way that Accrington were meant to be undone yesterday, because I've also got 2 lumps at the back, or 3 lumps at the back, centre back. So it's hard to get any ball through aerially. But yeah, when we're playing on the floor, there's a good example. I have to reset and try and find our way back into the game. And yeah, after about half an hour there, chances did start to look like that.
Yeah, there was that one for us, and then there was actually a couple for Stanley as well. And it finally felt like there was 2 sides trying to score a goal. And that's with no disrespect to Accrington Stanley. I mean, if they come to our place and get offered a 1-1 draw or a 0-0 draw at 3 o'clock, they'd probably take it to build on last week's victory. But yeah, they had a couple of opportunities, and they both fell to young Dara Costello, who was one player that I actually sort of mentioned in the preview show as one that might be a danger. He'd got 3 goals in, I think, 7 or 8 games before Saturday afternoon. Curled effort, left-footed from him. I think it was probably going to, I'd say, hit the post, but Glenn Morris didn't know that, has to get down and get a fingertip to it. We deal with the corner fairly routinely, which was good. Second chance is a better one for Costello, though. There's a ball sort of gets played in, and then there's a bit of pinball, falls to Costello. He's like 8 yards out with no one around him. I think as fans, we all look to the linesman because he looks miles off. He's looked miles off in the replay that I've seen as well, but the flag doesn't come up. Glenn Morris has to make another save. And at that point, you went, right, we've definitely got to stay switched on here, because they have got players that can cause us problems if given the opportunity.
I think you've hit a really key point there. I think Accrington were always going to have a threat regardless. No matter, I think every team in this league has that in the locker, and you need to be in games, need to be reminded of that, particularly if you're at home meant to be the stronger side. But Costello yesterday, I don't know how he hasn't scored in that first half in those 2 passes to play. I mean, Morris does excellently well for the second one as well. Like, it's one of those ones where you go, oh, he saved it, but it's offside, but it wasn't offside, so it was actually very vital that he saved that one. But the first one, actually, just from my angle, it looked like it wasn't even hit the post. It looked like it might be going wide a couple of inches. But like I say, as a goalkeeper, you never know what it's best to make that save and put it out of play rather than being silly and risking something like that, which I would like to talk about in the first goal we conceded, actually in the second half. But that's we'll come to that. But it's yeah, as a goalkeeper, you definitely just want to make sure that the ball is in a safe position for you to reset and defend again. And Morris
Yeah, absolutely.
did that yesterday. Yeah.
Because if he leaves it and it nestles in the bottom corner, we're talking about a goalkeeper error. And as you've just alluded to, unfortunately, there will be one to talk about in a little while. And as good as Glenn's been, we do have to talk about it. But similar, we like to reference cricket on this podcast and this channel. I think it's similar, isn't it, to a batsman leaving one that he thinks going past him to the wicket keeper, and then he hears the death rattle of his off stump being uprooted, and it would have been similar in that situation.
Exactly.
Maybe we should just talk about cricket. England won the cricket. Should we talk about cricket?
Yeah, we does. I've heard they got 800 runs in one in test innings. I'd caught bits of it.
Yeah, mental.
Apparently did quite well against Pakistan.
Yeah,
this is a pseudo cricket podcast, isn't it? Really,
I think we secretly just want to be warmer, don't we? Oh yeah,
I think that's it. Really,
first team to score 500 in a test match and lose by an innings. Lovely. Anyway, let's get back to the rubbish that was the football. Yeah, basically that was half time. There wasn't else a lot to talk about in terms of the first period. And then I've written down, we do what we've done very well all season. We start halves brightly, and for, I can't remember, it's got to be at least half a dozen times this season now we've scored early in halves. Carlisle, first 5 minutes. Chesterfield, early second half. There's been others. Tranmere, I think, was early second half. It's a really, really good goal as well. We work it well enough out to the right-hand side. I think, again, it's Nolan and Hutton link up. Hutton sort of feints to cross with his right foot, jinks back in onto his left. Keeper comes try to claim it and misses him. It goes over Jaden Clark's head. And at that point, you think, right, maybe the chance is gone. You then see Armani a little arriving at pace. And for all the world, you're telling him, just clip it back stick. Just clip it back stick. No. Armani Little decides on the run, wrong foot, away from goal, half volley, that essentially is in the net before Krellin's even set himself. It's an unbelievable hit. And that's the end of the show. No.
I wish it was. It was it's a great goal. And it's interesting because obviously when you're sat in the Rainham end, you can see Little encroaching and possibly creating that chance. On the camera, when it goes over and over the goalkeeper and over the rest of the fence, I think, oh, there's no one there. It's just going to go out for something. And he just comes into camera instantly. And then before I know it's in the back of the net, he's absolutely creamed it. He's middled that, and it's absolutely phoned into the top left-hand corner. Yeah, exactly, one of those ones. And what's really interesting when that goes in, and I wonder if this could be an interesting catalyst about the character of the team, is that when that goes in, I wonder if everyone relaxes and goes, "Oh, thank goodness for that. We've got it in the back of the net." And I wonder if that might have been a problem moving forward, because I just felt there's an air of like, finally we've scored, and potentially not a big thinking we're going to go and get two or we're going to win the game. I reckon that mentality might have been felt amongst both fans and players on when Little scored yesterday.
Well, we'll park that and we'll come back to it at the end of the show. But for 10 minutes, we actually did look like we might go and get a second. I'm not saying we created loads of stuff clear cut, but there was balls into the box. Krellin was having to come and punch and claim. They were having to head stuff behind for corners, last ditch blocks and that type of thing. And yeah, maybe there was a little bit of that. I don't know. But I couldn't, for the life of me, at that point, if you'd paused the game on 50 minutes and said, who wins this game? I think 10 out of 10 people say Gillingham. We were on top. Accrington weren't offering anything. They was going to have to be a little bit more open. We've got players that can pick them off on the counter-attack like we've done in games this season. Notts County goal, 2 against Tranmere with 10 men. It just makes that last half an hour or so even more incomprehensible. That's a big word for a Sunday.
Nice. But that's you know what, that's very impressive, Matt. You've managed to come out with that word, because I tell you what, after players on that pitch, they wouldn't be able to say any of those words after that, because I don't think they have the cognitive ability to, based on what we saw yesterday. Genuinely, I was very shocked with it all. However, it is the incomprehensibilities of it. There we go.
That's 8 syllables. You just beat by 6 syllables.
It's a very long word. That
there are other word and cricket channels available, as we do like to advertise all the time.
But it makes that last half an hour unbelievable. Yeah, because you're right. if you ask any person who wins this game when they see the still of that game with the stats and the way it's going, with 6,700 Gills fans in the stadium, you think they're going to walk and shooting towards the Rainham end of the second half. I mean, we've been
Yeah,
yearning for that.
maybe that's not so important after all.
Maybe not. Yeah, maybe Max would lose the toss after all that, and that's what's been happening.
I actually said before the game that I said if we win 4 out of 5 shooting towards the Rainham in first half, then let it continue. Like,
Yeah,
and I was
right.
joking, but yeah, that last 35 minutes, I still can't get me. I try now. I've watched Gillingham a long time. I try not to get too angry, but I was like, even at like 8 o'clock last night, I was still absolutely fuming at
Yeah.
that. I just could not believe how we switched off so massively and imploded so quickly.
That was that. I'm usually, like, when I make my content, that's how I get it off my chest. It's like it's done now. I can part that. It's happened. There you go, kind of thing. But it was yesterday actually. One of the rare occasions where it did affect me a little bit longer than normal. Because I was just surprised about how it happened, and how, I don't like to use the word unprofessional because I don't think that's always fair use of the word, but it did feel a little bit like that. It just didn't feel like professionally seeing the game to a conclusion how it should have gone. But, all shoulds and woulds, it doesn't always turn out that way. And there are reasons for that, which we're probably about to discuss. But it was very frustrating nonetheless. And I felt it longer than normal.
Yeah, absolutely. And from that point, it seems I've just written down stuff about Accrington being a threat and us just being completely gone. Half chances, Morris had to palm away an effort from Batty, and I think the rebound then got blazed into the Brian Moore stand. So with a bit more composure there, they could have got another shot on target, caused us an issue. Max Eamer then asked to make the last-ditch blocks to prevent something coming into a dangerous area. We then make a change. Jaden Clark's withdrawn, who I thought was all right on the afternoon. He does his work both ways, which I think is more than we can say for Jack Nolan. And that's not a slight on Jack Nolan. I just think they're slightly different types of wingers. You can almost afford Jack Nolan to be the one that just stands up there if you're on top in games and almost cheat, and be an outlet if you know that the other side are going to take risks and leave space in behind. Jaden, I think, is the one. We've said it before, twice with 10 men. He's been absolutely immaculate defensively. Joe Bode came on, straight swap. Joe didn't have loads of influence on the game yesterday afternoon, but I want to talk about him at the end of the show. And then the equaliser came, and it was so out of the blue, it was ridiculous. But it's all our undoing. There is absolutely no danger at all when Max Amos slides a ball back to Glenn Morris. He's got 2 options there. He plays a simple 10-yard pass to Max Clark, or he has a touch and he just clears it upfield and we reset. He goes for the former, gets it horrendously. Excuse me. Gets it horrendously wrong. Scuffs it 5-6 yards behind Max. Max then's got 2 options. Take a touch, try and do what he does, gets it wrong. Or he can have a touch, clear it out for a throw-in, we reset again. From there, we're in trouble. No one's set. We're all lopsided. Ball gets played into Ben Woods, I think it is. He earns his luck. Deflection. 1-1. Accrington Stanley up. Crowd a bit deflated, and we've got to start again.
It is, well, yeah, you described that perfectly. Actually, there's something with I mean, Morris, I mean, he's been very good with his feet, actually, throughout since he's been in the sticks. Actually, I've been very impressed. So, everyone makes a bad pass every now and again. I mean, you look at OG at Crew, like, it happens, and it just happens that because Glenn's the number one, it's more exposing, it's more of a risk when he does make a bad pass. But it wasn't the worst pass. It still got to Clark in its own way. And for me, even though Morris did make that poor pass, I do have to say, I think Clark really should be doing significantly better and seeing the danger of going, right, like you say, I've got 2 options here. I can turn on the back foot, try and clear it, but keep it in play. Or even, like you say, kick out for a throw. And I even just kick it out for a corner. Like that's the flow there he's going to at the moment. I think even that was a safer option and just reset from the corner. But because all he does is clears it 18 yards, and then all of a sudden everyone's all over the place. I think there's a little bit of really bad decision making from Clark on that one on my part, and even though it was a poor pass from Morris, he's not completely to blame. Clark, I do think Clark is for me the main reason that ball ends up in the back of the net, albeit a very fortunate deflection off of OG to put in the top right hand corner. But that's kind of where I stand with that one.
Goalkeepers union, bloody thing.
Oh, yeah, that's a fair point.
I think they're equally culpable. Like, it's a simple pass. That's not a. If Glenn was under pressure, I'd say absolutely no issue with that. But he's under no pressure. He can have a touch and pass it. He tries to do it quickly, which is fine. We want our goalkeepers to do that. You've said that. But then, again, like Clark all afternoon got the ball, played it down the line left-footed. Why not just do that and go over halfway instead of going with your weaker foot? For me, both of them played the percentages. Neither did. And it started to unravel very, very quickly from there.
Yeah.
We were ragged. I've written down, at that point, if you was a neutral just walking into the ground, you couldn't tell the difference between who was second and who was 23rd at kickoff.
That's a really fair point, actually. Yeah, you couldn't tell. Yeah, that's really compelling. That, my goodness me, you're absolutely right. The game just, if you could argue that's a testament to how close League Two is, but I don't want to use that argument because I feel that we should be, and we have personnel who are better than what Accrington have. We do, and we home, and it's a fact that you can't tell who's in what position in the league based on what you can see in front of you after the last 30 minutes is concerning at best.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, we know everyone can beat everyone, and Mark keeps going on about the table still very early, but we're getting to that point, 12, 15 games, which is where he said the table takes its shape. We're one game away from that. It just, from there, everything that could go wrong just went wrong. Glenn Morris then went off injured. It was part of a triple change. It was him, Nolan and Wiley got withdrawn. We brought on Luca Ashby-Hammond to go in goal, and then Johnny Williams and George Lapsley. Looked like a changing system, looked like a diamond. So Bode was moved up front to Nevitt. It then looked like behind there we had Ethan Coleman as the defensive midfielder, Johnny and Armani from the sides, Georgie as the 10 supporting back four and keeper. The same, aside from obviously Ashby-Hammond coming on. Nothing changed though. Absolutely nothing changed. Certainly in terms of anything positive from a Gills perspective. We didn't have any control of the football. We didn't have any control of the game. There was no pattern to our play, even when we did have it. Everything just seemed to be hopefully played forward, and in the hope that Bode or Nevitt might flick something on, or someone would do something magical like Little had done for the goal. Stanley is still doing the same things. Sort of 20 minutes to go. They're thinking this is one hell of a point here away from home against a team that could go top. So they're still slowing it down. They're taking longer over kicks. They're taking longer over throw-ins. They still want treatment for absolutely everything. We can sit here and moan about that though, Rhys, and say, oh, the number 4, 6'7", he's gone down holding his face or holding his foot or holding his shin when he's not been touched. But we'd be doing exactly the same things at that similar situation. We were taking our time over goal kicks, throw-ins, corners, substitutions, restarts at Notts County when we were 1-0 up. We were doing it at home to Chesterfield, playing with 10 men. So we can't say that, oh, it's all right for us to do it, and then say it's the dark arts, or it's not allowed when a team's doing it to us.
I saw a couple of people on social media allude to that idea, how Accrington came to play, and I just think, yeah, but we've done that this season, so like that happens, right? And that's what we would do. It's a part of the game, and it's what it has a phrase, gamesmanship. That's what it's called, right? That's the idea of it. Is you bend the rules to your advantage, and
as we always say, it's up to the referee to book someone for time waste. And if the referee doesn't do his job and book someone for time wasting, instead of doing this thing where they go, oh, here's another warning, here's another warning, here's another warning, and then usually get a sort of token yellow card in the 90th minute when it means nothing, they're going to keep doing it. And we would as well in the same situation.
Absolutely. And so therefore, like, I don't blame Accrington for that. And as a tactic to try and to slow the game down and disrupt it, I commend that approach, even though it's the most annoying thing. It's actually for us to respond to. It's not for, they're going to do it. We need to respond to that. We can't just moan about it. We need to do something about it, right? and we didn't yesterday, and it's a real annoyance, actually, real frustration.
And the other issue is, which is the bigger picture, is other teams will be watching that. So Bradford would have seen that. Newport County will see that. They'll do exactly the same thing. They'll go, hang about, this team, if they concede a goal, isn't quite sure how to react. Conceded first at Doncaster, lost 1-0. Conceded first against Grimsby, lost 1-0. Conceded first against Crewe, lost 2-0. Slightly different yesterday, but as soon as that went to 1-1, it was exactly the same pattern of play afterwards. We went completely.
It seems that we can't seem to react to anything negative happening to us, and that, you know, if we, which is surprising considering we went 1-0 up actually, because that usually gives us a bit of confidence, and I think we'll talk about that. I reckon that was some of the problem actually, but yeah, you like Bradford, Newport, anyone watching that, they're going to go, oh right, if we can get the first goal, we'll probably win. Which sounds to me like a Gillingham side last season where we had real problems after when we were behind. And that was always, if you can go 1-0 up against Gillingham, you're going to win the game. No matter if you go 1-0 up in the first minute or in the 80th minute, you're going to win. And it's, I thought we overcame that. Maybe not. And that's a real problem.
No, I think we have to say we haven't at the moment, because the times when we've conceded the first goal or been put under pressure at 1-1, I think the only other goal we've conceded was Carlisle, and that was still 2-1 in front. Yeah. So there is still an issue there, and we'll talk about what's maybe causing that in a minute. We made another change. Ethan Coleman was withdrawn. Didn't have the best game. Thought he was decent first half. Second half, I thought we struggled. Maybe that's a fitness thing still. Or maybe he's just out of form. Players go through trots of form where they're not playing well. We brought on Ollie Hawkins. So it looked like we stayed with the diamond, but there was another shuffle about, and we'll talk about that in more detail as well. There's a couple of yellow cards for Stanley. We're wasting time still. Absolutely no problem with that. Like you say, we've got to be better. 6 added minutes came up. Again, the crowd tried to get behind the boys, and in the hope, expectation that we could maybe find a winner. There was a goal in injury time, but it went to our opponent. So I know Mark Bonner was particularly infuriated by this one. It's a horrible goal to concede. But firstly, I'm going to give credit to Dara Costello, because the touch and finish across Ashby Hammond is absolutely spot on. Like, if you're teaching a kid as you're running through on goal what to do, that is it. Absolutely textbook. Touch, head up, cross the keeper, into the far corner. Job's a good one. Fair play to them 71 Stanley fans. They've had a brilliant afternoon. But from our perspective, it's absolutely disgusting again.
It is. It's just leaving gaps open everywhere. Everyone loses shape, position, and where they should be. The role, it just looked messy, and you can understand why the pass got through to Costello, because it was it was a lovely ball, but it was quite an easy pass just because we made it easy. It was
because from the free kick to start with, Shadogi feels like, oh, I don't have to jump.
Yeah,
I'm not going to jump for a header near the halfway line. I'm just going to let him have easy possession. And they just run through the middle of us. And like you say, it's one simple pass. Same as Grimsby. Again, same as Crewe. Like, Mark Bonner's spot on in his press conference in saying, from being a team that was difficult to score against, we look like we're going to concede every time someone runs at us at the moment.
Absolutely. It's amazing how it can just change like that. And I have one or two particular ideas why that might be the case. But yeah, I don't want to take, to a certain extent, I don't want to take it away from Costello, because like you say, it's an absolutely brilliant finish. Like you say, textbook. And as a goalkeeper going on the end of some of those, that's how you do it. And they're horrible to try and save, because you're moving one way, ball goes the other, they're challenging. So yeah, but it's just the fact that we allow that to happen so easily is the real concern. And when I just think 4 games ago, we weren't like that. We were playing against teams with 10 men and we weren't like that. And so what's happened there? Like, it's a real concern for me. I think what it is, I think there's an element of complacency somewhere within there that's probably causing this a little bit actually. But yeah, it's a real concern that we're allowing that to happen on our own patch as well.
Yeah, it's always more frustrating when you lose at home, especially up until the Grimsby game. We was unbeaten at home for the best part of 9 months or whatever it was. So, right, let's talk about Mark Bonner's press conferences. I've watched some of it. He talks about mentality and organisation and character, which we have to question. Like we've already said, 3 weeks ago, we looked like a side. We was almost impenetrable. Now, we look like chocolate fire guard. We're just so easy to play through. We melt at the first sign of pressure. There's been stuff on social media I've seen last night. I did have a brief look. Similar to you, I tried to stay off it that night if it's been a poor performance and defeat, because I think a lot of what I see is reactive. I prefer myself to have a look the next morning when you've had the benefit of a night's sleep. Is it the players? Can we continually blame managers? We used to say, was it Neil Harris or the players? We then said, was it Stephen Clements or the players? There's now murmurings, is it Mark Bonner or the players? exclude Joe Bode because he wasn't a regular up until the start of this season. 10 of that 16 that got on the pitch yesterday afternoon featured heavily under Neil Harris and Stephen Clements at one time or another. So our fans were well within their rights to question the players' mentality like the manager has done afterwards, because there's something fundamentally wrong if we keep being put under the most small percentage of pressure and we absolutely collapse like a deck of cards in a small breeze.
Absolutely. It's, yeah. If you're saying, if you've got the personnel that is now under the leadership of 3 managers, and they're not reacting like professionally under any amount of pressure, like Acton were doing yesterday, that I can understand why there are questions being asked about the players. I get that. And it's a funny one, because obviously up until this point, I think Bonner's got a lot of things right. I think we're going through a really horrific patch at the moment, but then it's to try. Yeah, I think the start of the season we looked very good, and we looked like a team that were impenetrable. We were going to scrap 1-0 wins, win games we probably didn't play well, and that was what we were. I think Gills fans are generally quite excited by that. But now it's sort of, we're being unpicked a little bit. We're being found out maybe a little bit, and and Accrington yesterday pressed high. That was one of their game plans. They pressed really quite high, quite quick, quite energetic, just to disrupt. And we lost control. And I think we all of a sudden it's kind of like, oh, we're not being allowed to play how we want to play, and therefore we don't play very well. Actually, it should be, oh, we need to play in a different way against a team like this. And I think therefore my sort of conclusion to that is the players need to take responsibility of that approach of how Accrington are playing, and Bonner needs to be able to impart that on the players as well, and react to the way certain teams are playing, because with that a little extra added bit of pressure, like you say, they're just decks of cards being blown over in the wind, and that is not a promotion winning approach.
No, because how many times did we talk about, the great sides in football that dug out results when not playing well? And Mark Bonner spoke very early when he took over, and he said it at the early part of the season about character. You'll find out about players and teams' character when stuff starts going wrong on the pitch. Generally, up until Grimsby, we'd done it very, very well. That there was a small blip at Doncaster, but it wasn't a horrendous performance. We'd had spells in games against Carlisle where we'd got pegged back and we'd gone on and seen it out. We'd got 2 more goals and been clinical. We'd seen it out with 10 men against Chesterfield and Tranmere Rovers. We'd gone to Fleetwood and were second best. Managed to dig in, get a draw. Morecambe, tight game, nitty, gritty, got a win. Can we sit here and honestly say that the Grimsby goal, the 2 Crew goals, and the Accrington 2 goals, they've had to work really hard for? Absolutely not for me. They've not had to be brilliant to play to score against us. Someone whacks one in the top corner from 30 yards, or it's a 15-move pass, and you go, all right, fair enough. But it's literally Grimsby just ran through the middle of us. Through. What was the first Crew goal? Lost the ball simply. They ran through the middle of us and cut back. Second goal, didn't compete for a header on the halfway line. First goal yesterday, sloppy with the ball. Second goal yesterday, didn't compete for a header on the halfway line, ran through the middle of us. We just look so loose without the ball at the moment. It's terrifying with Bradford coming up next week. I'm not being funny. They're playing well. Andy Cook's flying. We could be sitting here next Saturday talking about 4 on the spin as it stands.
And I've heard a couple of people allude to that, maybe even 5 on the spin as well. But we've got to be really careful here. We need to find some footing. We need to find something, because at the moment, if this continues, this approach, it's not gonna work. The people like to phrase it, or they found this out, or no plan B. I'm very cautious using those terms, but it's it definitely feels like if you play a certain way against us, we're much easier to beat, and I think that was exposed particularly yesterday. But Grimsby came with that plan as well, and it worked, and so did Crew. So something needs to change. One of the things I want to build on from what I said earlier is when that goal went in with Little, I genuinely think a lot of the players thought, we've won this game now, so we haven't got maybe work as hard. And I think there's an element of complacency that sort of washed over the team when that goal went in. And you can kind of understand it, like, oh, we've got a goal. We normally get a goal early when we start a first or a second half. This time it was second half, and suddenly everyone at the ground, everyone on the pitch is like, oh, we've got a goal. We should be okay. We've seen games out with 10 men before. This will be fine. And I think sometimes that mentality can be a high risk because you start to not go and give the extra 10%, which can then get you over the line in a very nitty-gritty affair. And I think yesterday we didn't give that 10%. It was less than that, actually. Well, it was, I just think it all fell apart very quickly. And I think the catalyst of that, or one of the big catalysts of that, was an element of complacency.
And we all know about momentum. If you suddenly go, we can't answer that. We don't know for sure if that's what it was. And it goes back to the point earlier. I don't think it's a case of the players not trying, which was levelled at them last season as well. I just think they had a very, very bad half an hour and just struggled to react. So I don't think it's a case of not trying or being unprofessional. I suppose that's the same thing, isn't it? But yeah, it's certainly a concern. You said there about potentially 4 defeats on the spin, not playing well. Well, I've got a point about Mark Bonner, and I'm going to question whether Mark Bonner's culpable as well yesterday for a few reasons. Because I think it's only right, and we said this last week after Crewe, when we were poor in games or spells of the season under Neil Harris or Stephen Clements, people will say more particular with me, that's fine. We ask questions. We have to ask questions at the moment. Did Mark Bonner get elements of yesterday wrong? And I'm going to start with the first one. We'd won 4 out of 5 at home, playing 4-2-3-1. Scored 10 goals, 2 a game. Yes, I know there was 4 in one game and 3 in another, but there was also games where we've had to play with 10 men for half an hour and that type of thing. But the facts are we were averaging 2 a game, playing a system. And let's be honest, the Grimsby defeat was forgivable for me. We weren't horrendous because we said at the time they just did what we did to Notts County. Fair play, that happens. The last 2 have been terrible. So that's my first question. Did we get sucked into playing a system just because of who we were playing rather than sticking to our principles and doing what we'd continue to do for most of the season at home?
It's interesting. That's a really interesting argument, actually. If you're doing, if it's been successful before, I suppose that you feel that you should play your own game and people have to play a match against you. The argument there is, well, if you play a system, then teams can then work you out, as they say, and then but then if that's the case, you need to have a second system that you also are comfortable playing to be able to shape things up. Did we see yesterday that second system? That was awful. I don't know, but you're right. To have scored 10 goals to a game with a system that seemed to work and to play in the way that we would like to play, I think if we were to, in hindsight, to play that game again, I think you'd go and revert back to that system because you play in a way that you know and feel more comfortable with, rather than playing against, trying to set up against what you might expect against you. Absolutely.
And I get you've got to take into account opposition, but Mark Bonner talks about a lot. He says we do 75, 80% is on us. 20% is the other team. For me, it felt maybe, I know hindsight's a wonderful thing, because if we go and win 3 or 4-0 yesterday, we don't say a word, but I just felt we took more notice of the opposition than perhaps we had to do. Because like I said, no disrespect to Accrington, this was a team that was 23rd at kickoff, won 1 league game all season. That brings me to my second point, and we spoke about it last Saturday. Last Saturday, we made changes, and we had Elliot Nevitt, Ollie Hawkins and Timmy Dieng all in the same space, all trying to do the same thing. It didn't work. It looked chaotic, it looked panicked, it looked flusters. Yesterday, we had 3 players doing exactly the same thing again. It was just that it was Joe Bode, Elliot Nevitt and Ollie Hawkins instead of Timmy Dieng. I thought we looked chaotic. Like there was no structure at 1-1 to try to win the game by sticking to our principles, making right decisions. It just became, oh, let's kick it hard and into the box and hope again that someone creates something, a bit of magic, or they make an error. I'm all for trying to win football matches, Rhys, and be brave at 1-1 and taking the chance. But if we were as bad as we watched yesterday, and Mark Bonner would have watched that, surely there's a case, especially after back-to-back defeats, where you just go, all right, we've not been good. We'll take our point. It stops the rot and we start again. We ended up with a diamond that consisted of no holding midfielder. We had a box-to-box 8 in Armani Little, who'd scored our goal, being the deep line protector, not his best role. We had Johnny Williams and George Lapsley, 2 10s, being told to play as 8s. And we had Joe Bode, who's been absolutely brilliant out wide this season, being told to play as a 10. And because we've gone to a diamond, we've got 3 big lumps up front in Bode, Hawkins and Nevitt, We've got no wingers to deliver. I think I can recall probably 2 crosses in the final 10 minutes from wide areas. So we negated all of our own threats by going so narrow in the middle portion of the pitch that there was nothing coming in to the 3 lumps that were, you'd say, would be competing in the air.
And furthermore to that, all of a sudden, those 3 up top who are trying to make things happen, they're getting no service, as you say, but then the pressure's all on them as well, which isn't nice. You know, they just come on, and it just isn't going to work if you've got no delivery coming at all. And the only delivery you get is coming from deep, from defence. And all of a sudden, you're just hoping that Hawkins might be able to get a flick on or win a free kick, which I think he does one of those things once. And it out of the rest of the time of that last half an hour, and it's just, yeah, it's a system that it reeks of desperation. Actually, yesterday it reeked of like, oh, we need to win because we need to do something. We need and everyone panicked, and probably everyone thought a draw feels like a loss. And I agree with you. Yesterday, a draw would have felt like a change, something to build again back. Yeah, and I think if we're talking about a draw today, I think 80% of the conversation is the same, but we'd end it with, but at least we've got something to build from now. We've not lost ground. We've got something to show for the last 3 games. The reality is we don't. And I think the desperation, the frantic approach of the last sort of 20 minutes yesterday, I think kind of underpinned how chaotic the last portion of that game was. And I don't think it was effective. And that, I'm sorry to say, falls on Bonner.
Yeah. And the players, they didn't execute anything well enough in that final half an hour. But
God, no.
Just what have we spoken about in terms of our best chances? First half, ball in from out wide, header for Coleman. Cut back from wide from Hutton, chance for Clark that's then saved, that's then cleared off the line for Wiley. Wiley's chance when he should score 1-on-1. Nolan pinches it in a wide area. Goal, cross from a wide area. We then went so narrow and had literally no ball coming in. It was so easy for 3 big centre halves. They must have been laughing. How often do we say it's great if you can defend the game in front of you? No one turned around. It was awful. It was so bad. It was untrue.
But we mentioned last week with Crew, like if we're using the benchmark as the Crew game that we should never go back to, where does this one fall?
Well, I think the last half an hour certainly is probably lower.
Yeah,
in terms
I agree.
Of mentality and our ability to react. I think the whole performance against Crew was worse as a 90 minutes. And I thought up until 55, we were okay yesterday and we was doing enough to get ourselves in front. But yeah, much in the same as we can't let Crew happen as a 90 minutes again. We can't let that last half hour happen again.
At all, at any point.
Keeps happening, and the more we keep talking about it, means that it is continuing to happen, and that's when the concern grows.
And ultimately, I think what's really important to not lose sight of here is that we understand we will go through bad patches. We'll have bad games, we'll have bad moments, and we need to react to that. Some bad moments may be longer than we want. Yeah, we might suddenly at some point there's a win 5 in a row, and it feels very different. But I think what's really important is that actually the context of this game is that we are showing that maybe we are not a promotion winning team as what has been advertised, what we want at the start of the season. And I think that's what we need to hopefully never lose sight of, is that we're meant to be trying to push at least for that top 7. But yesterday, like you've already said at that start of that like at the end of the first half, you couldn't tell what position this team was in the league. You didn't know one was, if you had to guess who's 23rd, you wouldn't know. And that for me is a real concern, because that's more of a foundational thing. And that we need to get away from that. We need to be the team that's dominant. We need to be the team that's moving the ball around and playing to our strengths in the principled way that Bonner sets up. And if we decide to go down like very narrow and go against all of our abilities and strengths, that's not a promotion winning team for me.
Food for thought. Anyway, last bit of food for thought, and I'm not going to comment on it, and I'm not going to get Rhys to comment on it. After 11 games in 2023-24, we had 6 wins, 1 draw, 4 defeats, 9 scored, 11 against. We had 19 points and we were sat 8th. After 11 games in 24-25, we played 11, won 6, drawn 1, you guessed it, lost 4, scored 13, conceded 7, points 19, we're 5th. How much has changed? I will leave that for you Gills fans to decide. Rhys, as always, thank you very much, mate. I would say it's been a pleasure, but you know what I mean. It's always good to talk, regardless it's a win, lose or draw. It's one of them. Like you say, we're in a rough trot. Fingers crossed we can come out of it quicker than possible. Gills fans, Accrington fans, as I always say, thank you for watching. If you're at this point, thank you very much again for all the support. Please click like, please hit subscribe as we keep striving to get towards 4,000 subscribers by the end of the season. I'll be back with a match preview in the week as we look ahead to another tough game away at Bradford next Saturday. But until then, I hope you've had a decent weekend and up the Gills.